Racist cops drew guns on a black woman. They forgot who she really was. The supermarket's fluorescent lights hissed like a cornered snake. Serafin Hayes, a black FBI agent with 20 years of grit, froze mid-aisle, a jar of marinara in her hand. "Hands up now," snapped Jax Jenkins, a young white cop, her pistol glinting with threat. The barrel aimed at Serafin's chest. Shoppers gasped, scattering like dust in a gust. "You're under arrest, suspect." Jenkins sneered, her voice dripping with scorn. Serafin's pulse roared, but her face held steady, a shield carved from years of facing peril. "Officer, I'm a federal agent." "Check my badge," she said, voice solid as stone. Jenkins scoffed, stepping closer, her finger twitching on the trigger. "Badge. You're just another thug in my town." The word thug cut deep, laced with racial poison. The injustice seared. Serafin, 45. A woman who'd hunted cartels and saved lives reduced to a stereotype. Her training urged compliance, but her pride screamed resistance. Shoppers whispered, phones filming the air electric with tension. Jenkins's eyes gleamed, drunk on dominance. "Move and you're done," she hissed. Serafin's mind raced. One false step and she'd be a statistic, yet she stood tall, unbowed, her identity black, fierce, honorable, clashing with Jenkins's bias. "I'm calling Chief Peterson," Serafin said, slow and deliberate, reaching for her phone. Jenkins laughed a sharp, cruel jab. "Go ahead, no one's saving you." But Serafin knew Talong Peterson, her childhood friend, now Maywood's police chief. One call could unravel this nightmare. As Jenkins's smirk wavered, Serafin dialed the phone's ring, slicing the supermarket's heavy air like a knife. The supermarket air choked with stale coffee and bleach, a sour tang stinging Serafin's nose. Music droned, a hollow hum clashing with the murmurs of onlookers. Their stares pricked her skin, some curious, some fearful, none daring to intervene. The linoleum floor gleamed under harsh lights, cold against her boots, grounding her as Jenkins's pistol loomed. Serafin's chest tightened, rage simmering beneath her calm facade. The insult of being targeted, her skin branded a crime cut deeper than the gun's threat. 20 years at the FBI, countless cases cracked. Yet here she was, stripped to a stereotype. Pain gnawed memories of past slights, flashing like lightning, whispered slurs, sidelong glances. But she was no victim. Resilience, hard-won, pulsed in her veins. She locked eyes with Jenkins, her gaze a quiet defiance, refusing to crumble. Her fingers steady on the phone clutched, hope Talong's voice a lifeline. The weight of injustice pressed, but Serafin stood firm, her mind sharp, calculating. She was a warrior, not a target. The crowd's whispers faded, her focus narrowed. This wasn't just her fight, it was for every soul judged by color. She'd endure, she'd prevail. 3 hours earlier, Serafin Hayes had driven into Maywood, her hometown, under a sky bruised with late afternoon clouds. The FBI badge in her pocket earned. Through 2 decades of relentless pursuit, cartels, dismantled hostages freed, felt heavier than usual. At 45, she was a legend in the bureau, poised, methodical, a woman who turned chaos into order. Yet Maywood, with its quiet streets and old oak trees, always pulled her back to simpler days. She'd come to visit her aging mother, to cook dinner, to reclaim a sliver of normalcy. She parked outside the supermarket, her navy blazer swapped for a simple sweater, blending into the Saturday crowd. Serafin, ever observant, noticed the usual kids tugging at parents' carts, rattling the hum of small-town life. But she also caught a glance from Jax Jenkins patrolling nearby. Jenkins, barely 25, had a reputation, whispers of her rough, arrests, her sneers at black and brown faces. Serafin, trained to read threats, sensed the officer's gaze linger not with curiosity but with suspicion. The absurdity struck her. She was no stranger to prejudice, case files, dismissed promotions, delayed her competence, questioned despite her record. But here in her hometown buying groceries, the injustice was laughable, yet it stung. Jenkins didn't see an agent who'd stared down kingpins. She saw skin, black skin, a threat in her warped lens. Serafin recalled a childhood incident, a store clerk trailing her and Talong accusing them of stealing candy they hadn't touched. Talong even then had vowed to fix Maywood's wrongs. Now as chief he was trying. Serafin had no criminal record, no suspicious behavior. She'd smiled at a cashier, picked up pasta, planned her mother's favorite meal. Yet Jenkins, fueled by bias, had trailed her through the aisles, radio crackling, eyes narrowing. The officer's prejudice was a script black woman alone must be trouble. Serafin's heart sank, not for herself, but for the town she loved, still shackled by old hatreds. She'd faced worse death threats, undercover ops, but this felt personal. Jenkins's actions weren't random. They were rooted in a system that too often let bias wear a badge. Serafin's calm exterior hid a fire she'd survived by outsmarting her enemies, by proving her worth tenfold. As she reached for the marinara, Jenkins's voice had shattered the moment, pulling her into a confrontation she hadn't sought, but wouldn't flee. Serafin's phone pressed against her ear, Talong's line ringing a faint lifeline in the supermarket's suffocating air. Jenkins's pistol stayed steady, her smirk a blade. "Put the phone down, thug," she snapped, voice low, venomous. "You think a call saves you?" Shoppers hovered, a frozen ring of faces, their silence louder than the Muzak's drone. Serafin's heart pounded, but her eyes never left Jenkins. She was a rock in a storm, her training a shield against panic. "I'm a federal agent," Serafin said, slow, each word deliberate. "You're making a mistake." Jenkins laughed, a harsh bark, stepping closer. The gun's muzzle loomed inches from Serafin's chest. "Mistake, I see a criminal." "Black sneaky, probably armed." The racial jab landed like a fist. Serafin's jaw tightened, anger flaring, but she held still. Years of facing down threats, cartel bosses, corrupt officials taught her control. She wouldn't give Jenkins the reaction she craved. "Check my ID." Serafin pressed, voice calm but edged with steel. "Inside my jacket, left pocket." Jenkins's eyes narrowed, her lip curling. "You don't tell me what to do." She reached forward, yanking Serafin's jacket open, the fabric tearing slightly. The badge gleamed, FBI insignia unmistakable, but Jenkins tossed it to the floor like trash. "Fake," she scoffed. "You people always got tricks." The crowd gasped. A teenage cashier whispered, "That's a real badge." Jenkins whirled, snarling, "Shut up, kid, or you're next." The girl flinched, retreating. Serafin's stomach twisted. Jenkins's cruelty wasn't just aimed at her, it was a power trip, a spectacle. The officer's radio crackled, but she ignored it. Her focus locked on Serafin. "On your knees," Jenkins ordered, her voice a whip. "Now." Serafin didn't move. Kneeling meant surrender, not to Jenkins, but to the hatred she wielded. "I'm not your enemy," she said, soft but firm. "You're escalating this for no reason." Jenkins's face reddened, her control slipping. "No reason you're in my town, acting suspicious, disrespecting me?" The accusation was absurd. Serafin had been buying groceries, nothing more, but Jenkins's bias painted her as a threat. A man in the crowd, gray-haired, stepped forward. "Officer, she's not doing anything wrong." Jenkins spun, gun swinging toward him. "Back off, old man." He froze, hands up, fear in his eyes. Serafin's isolation deepened. The crowd's courage faltered under Jenkins's rage. She was alone, the weight of prejudice pressing down her badge, meaningless in this moment. Jenkins's power was absolute, her arrogance a wall no reason could breach. "You think you're smart, Jenkins?" hissed, circling Serafin like a predator. "Calling your little friend? I run this scene." She grabbed Serafin's wrist, twisting hard, forcing the phone to clatter to the floor. Pain shot through Serafin's arm, but she didn't cry out. Her eyes burned with defiance, locking onto Jenkins's. "You're abusing your authority," she said, voice low, unyielding. "You'll answer for this." Jenkins laughed, but it was brittle, her confidence fraying. "Answer? To who? You're nothing here." She shoved Serafin against a shelf, cans clattering to the floor. The crowd murmured, phone still recording, but no one dared intervene. Serafin's mind raced, each second a gamble, each word a step toward survival. She was powerless, yet her spirit refused to break. Jenkins's cruelty was a mirror of every injustice Serafin had faced, the slurs, the doubts, the doors slammed shut because of her skin. But Serafin wasn't just an agent. She was a daughter of Maywood, forged in its struggles, bound to its hope. Talong's voice had cut off when the phone fell, but she knew he was coming. Jenkins's reign was temporary, her power an illusion. Serafin stood straighter, her silence a weapon. "You're wrong," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'm exactly who I say I am." Jenkins's eyes flickered, a crack in her bravado. The radio crackled again, urgent voices breaking through. "Officer Jenkins, stand down." The command was sharp, distant, but real. Jenkins froze, her grip on Serafin loosening. The supermarket's air shifted, the tension teetering. Serafin's heart steadied. She was still in the fight and help was near. Jenkins's cruelty had overreached and the consequences were closing in. The supermarket's air crackled, Jenkins's grip on Serafin's arm, loosening as the radio's command. Stand down hung like a guillotine. Serafin, back against the shelf, felt the bruise forming on her wrist, but kept her gaze locked on Jenkins. The officer's eyes darted, her bravado crumbling under the weight of the unseen voice. Serafin seized the moment, her mind a blade honed by years of outsmarting foes. She wasn't just an agent, she was a strategist, and Jenkins had underestimated her. "You heard it," Serafin said, voice low, steady. "Your orders are to stop." Jenkins scoffed, but her hand trembled, the pistol dipping slightly. "You don't scare me," she spat, yet her voice wavered. The crowd, sensing a shift, leaned closer, phone still recording. Serafin's heart raced. She was still in danger, but the tide was turning. She needed to push to break Jenkins's control before Talong arrived. "I didn't call just anyone," Serafin continued, her tone deliberate, cutting. "Chief Talong Peterson, my friend, your boss." Jenkins's smirk froze, her face paling. The name hit like a shockwave. Talong Maywood's iron-willed chief wasn't just a superior, he was a force. Serafin saw the doubt flicker in Jenkins's eyes, the first crack in her armor. "You're lying," Jenkins hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. Serafin pressed her advantage, standing taller despite the gun. "Talong and I grew up here. Same streets, same struggles. He knows me, trusts me." She paused, letting the words sink in. "When he gets here, who do you think he'll believe?" The crowd murmured a ripple of anticipation. Jenkins's radio crackled again, urgent voices overlapping, but she didn't respond. Her power was slipping, and Serafin saw it. Jenkins lunged forward, grabbing Serafin's collar. "Shut up!" she snarled, desperation creeping in. "You're nobody." But Serafin didn't flinch. "I'm Special Agent Serafin Hayes, FBI," she said, each word a hammer. 20 years of service, commendations, cases you couldn't dream of solving. Her voice carried not just to Jenkins, but to the crowd reclaiming her identity. A woman near the checkout whispered, "FBI. She's legit." The murmur grew, emboldening others. Serafin's mind flashed to her training: de-escalate, redirect, survive. She softened her tone, almost pitying. "You're young, Jenkins. You can still walk away from this. Lower the gun." Jenkins's jaw clenched, torn between rage and fear. The radio blared again. "Jenkins, this is Peterson. I'm 2 minutes out. Stand down." The chief's voice was unmistakable, a thunderclap. Jenkins's hand shook, the pistol wavering. Serafin saw her opening. "The cameras are rolling," she said, nodding to the crowd's phones and the supermarket's security lenses. "Your actions are on record. Think Jenkins. Is this worth your badge?" The officer's eyes widened, scanning the crowd, realizing her spectacle was her undoing. The power she'd wielded, built on prejudice and arrogance, was collapsing. Jenkins stepped back, her gun lowering slightly, but she didn't holster it. "You're still under arrest," she muttered, voice hollow, clinging to control. Serafin didn't move, her calm a stark contrast to Jenkins's unraveling. She'd planted the seed, exposed the officer's weakness. Talong's arrival was imminent, but Serafin needed one more push to ensure Jenkins couldn't backtrack. She leaned forward, voice barely a whisper, meant only for Jenkins. "Talong knows about your record. The complaints, the rough arrests. You think he'll cover for you now?" It was a calculated strike. Serafin had heard whispers of Jenkins's history through Talong over the years. Jenkins's face drained of color, her grip on the gun slackening. She was cornered, and she knew it. The supermarket doors burst open, footsteps pounding. Jenkins Talong's voice boomed, cutting through the tension. The crowd parted, revealing the chief tall, commanding, his face a storm of fury. Jenkins froze the gun, dropping to her side. Serafin exhaled relief, flooding her, but she stayed vigilant. Talong's eyes met hers, a silent promise justice was here. Jenkins stammered, "Chief, she's a suspect," but Talong cut her off. "Holster that weapon, now!" His tone left no room for defiance. The crowd held its breath, the moment teetering on a knife's edge. Serafin stood firm, her hidden strength, her bond with Talong, her unyielding resolve turning the tide. But Jenkins's next move was uncertain, and the danger wasn't over yet. Talong Peterson stormed into the supermarket, his presence a tidal wave badge gleaming under the fluorescent glare. Jenkins's pistol hung limp at her side, her bravado shattered. "Holster it, Jenkins!" Talong barked, his voice a gavel. She complied, hands trembling, the gun sliding into its sheath with a dull click. Serafin stood tall, her bruised wrist throbbing, but her spirit unbroken. The crowd exhaled the air, shifting from fear to anticipation. Talong's eyes locked onto Serafin, a flash of relief softening his fury. "You okay, Serafin?" he asked, low personal. She nodded, her voice steady. "I'm fine, Talong. Just glad you're here." His gaze hardened as he turned to Jenkins, whose defiance had crumbled into a pale, stammering mess. "Chief, she was suspicious," Jenkins tried, but Talong raised a hand, silencing her. "Save it," he snapped. "You pointed a gun at a federal agent. My friend." He gestured to an officer, trailing him a stern woman with a notepad. "Take her badge, radio, and weapon. She's suspended, effective immediately." The officer moved swiftly, stripping Jenkins of her gear. The badge hit the floor with a clatter, echoing the one Jenkins had tossed Serafin's moments ago. The crowd murmured, some cheering softly, their courage returning. Jenkins's face burned, her power stripped bare. Serafin stepped forward as Picking up her own badge, its weight a quiet victory. She dusted it off, slipping it into her pocket, her dignity reclaimed in that simple act. Talong addressed the crowd, voice firm but measured. This officer's actions don't reflect Maywood's values. We'll investigate fully. Justice will be served. Shoppers nodded, some clapping their phones, still capturing the moment for the world to see. Talong turned to Serafin, lowering his voice. I'm sorry this happened. Not in our town. She met his eyes, the bond of their shared history grounding her. It's not your fault, Talong, but it's real, still happening. He nodded, jaw tight, knowing her words carried the weight of countless others' pain. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent vow to fight that fight with her. The investigation launched that evening. Supermarket cameras, crystal clear, showed Jenkins trailing Serafin without cause, her gun drawn on a woman buying pasta. Witness statements piled up, the teenage cashier, the gray-haired man, others who'd seen Jenkins's rage. By nightfall, the evidence was damning: unnecessary force, racial profiling, abuse of power. Talong, true to his word, escalated the case to internal affairs, ensuring no cover-up. Jenkins was done. Within days, she was fired, her termination letter citing gross misconduct and violation of public trust. Her badge was gone, her career in ruins, whispers of civil lawsuits trailing her like shadows. She'd face a review board, maybe criminal charges, her arrogance a noose she'd tied herself. Maywood's police department issued a public apology naming Serafin as the wronged agent, her record spotless, her honor intact. Serafin, though, felt no triumph. Standing in her mother's kitchen that night, stirring marinara, she replayed the day. The gun, the slurs, the crowd's silence, they lingered scars on her soul. Yet she'd stood firm, her integrity a beacon. Her mother, frail but fierce, hugged her tight. You showed 'em, baby, like always. Serafin smiled, but her heart was heavy. Justice had come swift and sure, but it hadn't erased the wound. Talong called later, updating her. Jenkins is out. We're auditing the whole force. Training policies, whatever it takes. Serafin nodded, grateful for his resolve, but wary of the system's flaws. Keep pushing, Talong, she said, for the next one who doesn't have a chief on speed dial. He chuckled, but it was grim, a promise sealed in their shared past. The supermarket incident went viral, clips flooding social media, sparking debates on policing and race. Serafin's name trended, her FBI photocom resolute plastered across news feeds. She hated the spotlight, but saw its power, a chance to expose the rot, to demand change. As she sat with her mother watching the coverage, Serafin felt the weight of her role. She'd won this. Round her dignity restored, Jenkins punished. But the fight was far from over, and the next battle loomed, its shape unclear but certain. The investigation peeled back, Jenkins's facade like paint from a rotting wall. Internal affairs unearthed a pattern, complaints against her stretched back years, excessive force, racial slurs targeting black and brown residents. Each grievance had been buried, dismissed by a system that shielded its own. Jenkins wasn't a lone rogue. She was a symptom thriving in Maywood's blind spots. Her supermarket stunt caught on camera was no anomaly, but a bold escalation, her prejudice emboldened by impunity. Witnesses, once silent, found their voices. The teenage cashier, emboldened by Serafin's stand, described Jenkins's prior threats to her Latino coworkers. The gray-haired man revealed he'd seen Jenkins harass a black teenager weeks earlier, no charges filed. Social media amplified their stories, hashtags like Justice for Serafin trending. A barista at a local cafe posted about Jenkins's sneers at her hijab, sparking a flood of accounts. Maywood's underbelly was exposed, a culture of silence where fear had muzzled truth. The system's failure stung. Talong, furious, uncovered memos showing Jenkins's supervisors had ignored red flags, prioritizing team unity over accountability. He vowed reform, but Serafin knew the rot ran deep nationwide, not just in Maywood. The department's apology, though sincere, couldn't erase years of complicity. Jenkins had gambled on that protection, assuming her badge was a shield. She'd miscalculated. Serafin, watching the revelations unfold, felt a mix of vindication and grief. Her ordeal had cracked the dam, letting truth rush through, but at what cost? The voices now speaking brave raw had been silenced too long, their pain a mirror of her own. She met with the cashier, thanking her for speaking out. You gave me courage, the girl said, eyes shining. Serafin hugged her, her heart heavy with the weight of their shared fight. Jenkins's plot to assert dominance, to break Serafin, was undone by her own arrogance and the cameras she'd ignored. But the system's cracks remained a truth louder than her firing. As Maywood grappled with its shame, Serafin saw the spark of change, residents demanding oversight, accountability, justice. The silent were speaking, and she'd helped give them a voice. Serafin's exoneration came swiftly. Her name cleared, her FBI record pristine. Maywood's police department issued a formal letter praising her professionalism, but the victory tasted bitter. The supermarket incident had fractured something deeper: her sense of safety in her hometown, her trust in the system she'd served for decades. Nights were restless, the memory of Jenkins's gun flashing in dreams, her mother's worried eyes a constant weight, friends called less wary of her newfound fame, leaving Serafin in a quiet too heavy to bear. The emotional toll was steep. She'd faced cartels, bullets, betrayal, but this being reduced to a stereotype in her own community cut differently. Her mother, her rock grew frailer, the stress of the ordeal etching new lines on her face. "I'm proud, baby," she'd say, but Serafin saw the fear. What if next time no Talong answered? The viral videos brought support, but also hate, online trolls spewing venom, calling her a troublemaker. Her reputation, once ironclad, now carried scars, whispers of controversial trailing her at work. Yet Serafin's resolve didn't waver. The truth was stark: justice was a jagged edge, never smooth, never complete. Jenkins's firing was a win, but the system's flaws, its leniency toward bias, its slow grind remained. She could retreat, fade into the FBI's shadows, protect her heart. But Maywood's voices, the cashier's courage, the barista's defiance echoed in her. They needed her fight. She chose to stay in the fray. Not for glory, Serafin loathed the spotlight, but for the next black woman buying groceries, the next kid harassed without cause. She met with Talong, planning community forums, pushing for reform. The cost was high: sleepless nights, strained ties, but she'd carry it. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was worth her scars. As she stood in her mother's garden pruning roses, she vowed to keep fighting, her quiet strength a testament to an imperfect victory. Maywood stirred, its wounds exposed but healing. Talong's reforms took root: mandatory bias training, civilian oversight boards, and stricter disciplinary protocols. Residents launched petitions demanding transparency, their signatures piling like stones into a new foundation. Local media shifted, amplifying marginalized voices, while national outlets dissected the incident, fueling calls for policing reform. Serafin's story wasn't just news, it was a catalyst, a spark for change beyond Maywood's borders. She chose quiet over acclaim. Honors were offered, plaques, speeches, but Serafin declined, craving peace over podiums. Her fight continued, not in headlines but in community meetings, mentoring youth, supporting Talong's efforts. The spotlight wasn't her home. Maywood's streets were. Her mother's health stabilized, their evenings filled with laughter, a fragile gift after the storm. The town began to mend trust, budding like spring grass. Serafin, though scarred, found purpose in the change she'd ignited. One Sunday, she walked with neighbors to a memorial for victims of injustice, placing lilies at its base. The flowers glowed against the stone, a symbol of resilience, of battles fought and yet to come. Hand in hand with her community, Serafin felt their shared strength, a quiet promise to keep moving forward. Serafin Hayes' story isn't just hers, it's a mirror for us all. What will you do? Knowing a black woman, an FBI agent, faced a gun in her hometown for no crime but her skin, will you stay silent or speak? Her courage in that supermarket, her refusal to bow to prejudice, challenges us. Justice isn't a gift. It's a fight won through integrity and grit. Serafin's legacy isn't in headlines, but in Maywood's reforms, in the voices she freed, in the kids she mentors who dream without fear. Racism festers where silence thrives. Serafin's stand, backed by Talong's resolve and a community's awakening, shows solidarity can crack that silence. But the work isn't done. Every ignored complaint, every unchecked badge risks another Jenkins. Yes, you carry the torch. Call out bias, demand accountability, vote for change. Courage isn't loud. It's Serafin's calm under a gun, her choice to fight on despite scars. Her story asks, will you rise for what's right even when it costs you? Let her strength inspire you to act, to build a world where justice isn't a battle but a birthright. As Serafin said, pruning roses in her mother's garden, no one's free until we all are. Share her story. Fight for truth. Be the legacy. Like, share, comment, subscribe, spread this call to action. Racist cops drew guns on a black woman. They forgot who she really was.